This is Jimmy Theoc, and today I wanted to talk about how to read your P&L if you're a home service company. Just want to do sort of a three-part series on this particular topic. I've had the experience of being able to work with a big manufacturer here in Houston, and got about 2 years, 2.5 years of just sort of like understanding the home services business in general. And so, new experience for me when I did it. Learned a lot. Previously, before that, I had the opportunity to spend about 10 years sort of working on sort of commercial P&Ls. And so to go from that B2B sort of P&L management to B2C P&L management is a little bit unique in some sense. And so, but I do know from running a home services P&L, typically the challenge that homeowners, the owners of these organizations typically have is having time to sit down and sort of analyze where they could actually sort of like manage waste or optimization to be able to leverage and be able to get some better performance from their investment from a month-to-month deal. So there's a lot of successful businesses that do extremely well with this. And there's some that don't do very well with it and would need some support. It's sort of this topic is it will help both sides to sort of look at it. If you're really good at it, you at least get to sort of look at different ways of you could probably sort of optimize it. And then if you're not really good at it, this is probably a good opportunity to sort of look at and understand comprehensively where you could improve. And so I put a couple examples of so the first part I'll sort of introduce the P&L. And so for those who are not familiar with P&Ls, this is sort of your profit and loss statement. Essentially, this is how your business stays relevant. How do you pay your employees? How do you interact with vendors? How do you deal with transactions with your customers and clients? And so you have to understand the math every day to be successful. If you don't, you will pay a very, very your existence will be very short-lived. And so it's critical that that you're able to understand and be able to manage your P&L, right? So typically most small businesses will have accountants that'll give them the result at the end of the month. P&L sort of, if I had to summarize it, more of a product that that gives you sort of a scoreboard of where you're at. You still technically need to understand what it is, but you should manage a little bit further ahead of like, all right, so I know where we're at mathematically, but I still actually should be able to keep on sort of like pushing through on your day-to-day engagement, understanding what the scoreboard is going to be. So it's sort of like a scoreboard, a lagging number to some degree, but also something that you can actually change on a day-to-day engagement. When you look at, and I gave some examples of, I'm going to use a company called Apex Home Services. They're an HVAC slash plumbing outfit that I made up just for this general purpose. And and so when you look at the P&L, it's going to be one page, one period, three answers. You really want to know what's coming in, which is going to be your revenue. Revenues could come in many, many facets of ways into your business, and so we'll look at that as well. And then you got to know what's going out, and so that's going to be sort of your total expense that you're paying out, and that comes out in two different ways. And that's going to be broken out between your cost to buy the material to do the job, and then your cost to actually run the business. Those are your two biggest categories that you must pay attention to because there's some consequences if you don't manage that part right. Because if your revenue does not anticipate both those cost lines, you may be so there's going to be a gap of being able to actually pay for your business and for you to take home profits and pay employees. So you're sort of underpricing yourself to some degree. And so at the end of the day, what's left is typically going to consider your net income. Okay, so those are sort of the three main pillars, and so there's a lot in between those three, though. There's a lot in between those three, but I did want to sort of point out the three things you want to sort of be aware of is your revenue, total expense, and your net income. So, and so I'll go through each of them. And so for this particular session, we'll talk about sort of the general overview. And then the next couple sessions, I'll go into a little bit more deeper dive into sort of the percentages, variances to the numbers, how you manage that from month to month aspect, and then sort of get your organization aligned to the variances and understand why you have variances and what actions you could take to actually fix the variance, right? And so what you don't want to go is go very, very long period of time without really sort of correcting where you're at with particular variances that you need to be in or ranges. And so when you look at, for example, I took one where he said in 3 months. So I created one where it's 3 months here for an HVAC and plumbing outfit. And so they have one side of the business is HVAC, the other side is plumbing. And so you sort of see the summertime ramps up from April to June. This is a typical, when you look at service revenue, this is going to be your revenue where your guys are getting in the truck and you have a calendar and you got homeowners that want service and you're sending your guys out to go and service those homeowners. Okay. Then you have sort of your new installation for whether it be a new unit that needs to be put in, a furnace or anything else like that. So these very modest numbers, but just to give you guys an idea of what those numbers look like. And then you have maintenance agreements, which I like maintenance agreements because they're very predictable. And so whether or not you have, and you can write in these agreements, whether or not you're doing something very big or very small, I think that, but nonetheless, you can actually predict the revenue stream. So whereas with service and installation, you typically wait to hear the phone ring and then you answer the phone and you or take the lead and you go convert it, right? So maintenance agreements are a little bit more predictable because you know that you're always going to have that work. You look at parts markup, whatever parts you get, you're marking that up to a certain percentage. And so that's going to be sort of your revenue categories there. And so in this particular example, you see April is going to be 180, 210, 250. So nice little study flow going up there. And so and as we go through these, you typically want to look at a couple different things. You want to be trending in the right direction. If your business is cyclical to the environment, the sort of weather, in this case HVAC, you typically will have sort of a ramp up as service. If people turn on their ACs, there's the cooling, something goes out, and you really want to make sure your business is flowing directly proportionally to sort of the season there, and work that way. And so plumbing is, on the other hand, on top of that, is going to be sort of like very, very naturally steady work for the most part. And so, but HVAC is going to have that cyclical effect to it, whether it be in the winter or middle in the summer. So you want to look at that. And the other part too, which we'll look at in the future, is going to be like, what is my month-to-month trend? What is my year-over-year trend? I started this business 5 years ago. What is that? What does April, May, and June typically look like? Am I gaining market share? Am I losing market share in this particular quarter? And so those are things you really want to keep in the back of your mind as to grading how you're doing with revenue. When you look at cost of goods sold, this is going to be, what did I pay to get, what did it cost me to get the products or the particular pieces of products into the folks' home? Like what was my cost to sort of create, whether it be I had to go buy tape. I had to go buy tape to sort of tape up the sort of the ducting inside to install the vents inside the house. So those are going to be costs. And so what is the labor tied into to doing the job? So that's going to be all tied into that number. So your labor to be able to install, your labor to do the work, all sort of the cost to create that good for that customer. So whether it be contract labor, whether it be whether it be W-2 labor, all of that is sort of considered when you're in service. It's going to be tied into that number. So you really want to pay attention to that to your cost there. And I'll look at sort of the equation of gross margin next, but your profitability from just this portion here is critical, because when we start taking your profit all the way down to the net income and even the EBITDA part of your business, it really sort of like hammers away of where you're at with your revenue versus your costs. And so if your cost is to create that service is more than the revenue you're bringing in, you got to stop what you're doing and find why are you underwater that quickly before you go start paying your expenses, because that'll create sort of a negative trend on the way back down to your business bottom line. So in this case, you can sort of see the trend going up. And when you look at gross profit, as revenue goes up, typically you'll see cost of goods go up with it, and that's very natural. And so a great rule of thumb is sort of is managing how proportional that growth happens in terms of your revenue to your costs. And so so those are things that I would sort of coach and look at when I'm looking at somebody's P&L, is that is to sort of try to keep your cost of goods as flat as possible in terms of like and as your revenue ramps, that you know that you're able to scale, and you keep your cost line as flat as possible. And because keeping it as flat as possible will allow you to have a little bit more profit from back to the business. And so when you look at operating expenses are going to be sort of your some of your fixed costs. And when I say fixed costs, this would be sort of your building that you're in, that you're paying rent, computers, your utility, and phones, anything else that's used to sort of create the scenario where you're able to run the business that's not directly tied to actually installing the particular deal. So in other words, I have to pay these expenses whether I'm doing anything or I'm not doing anything, right? So if I'm installing, I still have to pay for it. If I'm not installing, I still have to pay for these. And so that may be your trucks. So it's going to be more your fixed costs. Whereas your cost of goods is going to be considered in accounting terms more variable. And so that line, so the variable line, the cost of goods, typically moves when an action is happening. I'm getting service revenue, or I'm getting an install revenue. So that'll move that line, but your OpEx line is always that bill's always gonna show up every month, regardless of whether you're installing or not. And when you look at where the money comes in, we talked about this already. So you sort of break it out between just 4 different areas. The advantage here is going to be that you, as a business, you have multiple revenue streams, and so the more revenue streams you have, the more options you have to sort of sustain your growth and be able to weather really short periods of market dropped or market contraction. And so it's imperative if you have a business that you're managing, a business that you at least create different avenues of revenue streams as you sort of mature to essentially have some cushion against market contraction. Okay, and also gives you a chance to be a little bit different in the market. In this case, I talked about recurring revenue is always really good, because it allows you to have some predictability of sort of your finances, and to have options about because when you have predictability of revenue, what it does is that it allows you to actually manage your workforce and keep them. What we typically see in the home services category is that, hey, if I don't see revenue, I drop my the guys that are on my payroll, and I pick them back up when it picks up again. So So that practice is very lumpy, and it creates scenarios where you may have sort of not very consistent outcomes back to your customer base, and so you really want to manage that. And so typically people try to manage that by having 1099s versus a W-2, where it's that becomes more of a fixed cost. But if you have enough reoccurring revenue, you're able to sort of have the flexibility between both the 1099 and W-2 because you have work that you know this particular year I'm going to make about $500,000 just on my agreements, and so then I can sort of have that foundation and then build everything on top of that, right? So we've seen a sort of a shift in the marketplace where private equities are buying up service companies, and their biggest push is to have more reoccurring revenue by selling subscription-based service contracts, and so which allows them to actually have sort of a picture of what that's going to look like for them for the year. Um, so what does it cost to do the work? Is going to be the other part. So you got direct costs. So these are going to be, and so these are going to sort of scale with revenue. How you manage those direct costs is critically important, and I'm going to talk about that at the end. Is that because there's very good ways to manage it, and if you don't manage it very well, again your cost of goods is going to like sort of escalate tremendously. Um, so in other words, so if revenue doubles, does your cost of good need to double with it? Not necessarily. There's ways to manage that to where you don't have to actually have your cost of goods skyrocket along with the revenue. And so we'll talk about that as well. When you look at what are the things that are direct cost, you look at materials, direct labor, vehicle and maintenance, equipment and tools could be tied. If you need that equipment and tool for that particular job, I tend to actually go back and forth on that one of whether it's really an OPEX or cost of goods. I think that in this case we have it here for as a cost of good to do the job and get it done. So those are the things that we have sort of allocated for cost of goods. And so you have, and so you can see the same prices, you can see the same figures that we had in the previous slides on. All right, we had a number. What was in that number? So here's the breakout of those numbers. When you look at revenue, so now we're going to look at gross profit. So revenue minus cost of goods. So the first margin that matters is going to be your gross margin, and it's going to essentially tell you, all right, so we're going to start off at, so we're going to take your revenue and then we're going to take off like what it costs to generate that revenue. All right, so just purely very simple. I made $180,000. What did it cost me to get to $180,000? I had to spend $90,000 to do it, so I got 180, right? So that from a gross profit standpoint, I made $90,000. Same thing in May, 210, cost me $105,000 to do it. In June, $250,000. It cost me $125,000 to generate that. Just from that standpoint. Now, of course, I'm saying that. Of course, everybody would tell me, Jimmy, what about the building that you were paying for and the cars, the trucks, everything else? Yes, we'll get to that point. But I'm just saying at this point, from a margin standpoint, let's measure if this part's even right to see where we are sort of at that gross margin, and then we'll look at net income at the end of the day, folks. Is going to be what really matters, right? So, but if you're not selling it and making a profit just from on these two lines, just initially, then you have a big pricing problem, right? So you really want to get your margin right to where you look at it says, am I really making money from the activity just generally? What am I going to get back from in terms of contribution margin back to pay for my operating expense later? Like I got to pay for this building. Am I even getting it from the activity that I'm doing? Right. So if these numbers are like, let's say the gross margin is 40%, 30%, and and you know that your OPEX is going to be probably around, it's going to probably eat up about 20% of that, then you're not going to make any money. So, and so you want to be sort of really cognizant about where you are in terms of your margin to start off with. If you think you need to make a little bit more cushion on 50%, what typically happens if you go up, you probably have sort of got to manage the economics of it. So whether you get less work, but more profitable work, we've seen some of those dynamics play out in the market. And so I would say at the end of the day, if I'm a consultant, I would say you have to be able to position your company to actually to survive. And so to survive, you have to make some, if you got to make tough decisions on cutting cost or raising prices, those are decisions you have to make to survive, right? So typically these are sort of the first metrics I would look at to make sure that I understand where am I dynamically with the business, right? So in this case, Apex made 50% across all 3 months, and so everything's okay. And so this is the sort of the target where the industry is around that 55 to 48% range in terms of gross margins, and so they're right there. When you look at cost of running the business, and so this is just going to be sort of your OPEX operating expense line, so we break that out as well. And so one of the biggest piece of it, and I sort of highlight that on here, is going to be your marketing costs and lead generation. Most businesses are going to live and die based off their ability to do this. And so if you have a business, in my case, I had a business where I had salespeople that would go to people's homes and talk about installation, like we're going to install a bathroom in your house, and the way that I did it was that we had leads coming in, and we said you got to run 3 leads today, and and you got to convert them, right? So, and you're not going to convert all of them, right? So in some cases, the best months we've had, if you get 3 a day for the entire month, Monday through Friday, and so you're looking at about close, a little bit over 80 to 90 leads that actually played out, and so you had to convert that at a pretty clip. So if you converted 8 to 10 of them, you did pretty good. If 10 to 14, you did excellent, and so 14 and up is extremely well, did extremely well, because your conversion rate starts to get up to the 50% range of the leads that I issued out to you. And so there's a math sort of play out on this that makes it critically important that you are not buying leads that don't convert. And so it has a material effect on the revenue line, your OPEX line, quite a bit. And so if you're not converting leads, it creates a whole host of issues. Number one, you're paying for the leads. In this case, we paid $18,000 for it, and it generated $180,000 in revenue for that month in April. And then you see $19,000 in May. So you really want to keep that as flat as possible, but you need to convert it. That's the most critical part. If you have a very low conversion rate, you need to look at the sources, and we'll talk about some of the traps. And so because whether you're not answering the phones fast enough to get the homeowner to actually convert on that sale, or your sales team is not out really converting very well. So those are symptoms you really want to pay attention to, and you really need to be around a percentage of your revenue needs to be, I would say 20% or less of your revenues needs to be tied into marketing lead gen. If it gets really, really higher than that, then you're really inefficient. And then you want your conversion rates to be around 40-50% in terms of your conversion rates to what you're investing into. And so if it's less than that, then you really got to dig deep a little bit and look at the lead sources and everything else. And so very, very critical point. I highlight that because you don't do anything, nothing happens until you actually have leads coming in that you convert and generate into revenue, right? So nothing else matters. Then you have office salaries of folks that are not directly tied into doing installations. And so this could be sort of your receptionist. This could be sort of accounting. This could be billing, project folks that are probably tied with buying material for your group, warehouse folks that are in the warehouse and sort of putting things together. So that could be some of the office salaries there, insurance for the business, office rents, office vehicles, software, professional services. These are things that will probably come due every month. So your cost, your fixed cost category, and so these are going to come at you, and you got to make sure that you have revenue coming in to cover these costs. Okay. Um, when you look at tracking every dollar back to a source, um, and I remember I spent a little bit of time talking about marketing a little bit because it's very sort of critical that you understand the marketing component of it. And so, number one, there's a couple of things you look at. You look at some of your book rates, how many calls turn into book jobs, um, direct referrals, and essentially what you want to do is you want to get your customer acquisition costs as low as possible, right? So, uh, in my early days when I worked for a company called Kohler, and we were working on just sort of acquisition costs and everything else, and we looked at and we were selling pretty high end stuff, high end bathroom product, and we were installing this. Our acquisition cost was extremely high, and what we found out was that our lead sources were sort of not in the right spots, and we had to sort of optimize where the lead sources needed to be. And we found out that Google's was a really good area for us to actually be efficient because we had more high intent customers um, that were really more interested in really doing the project, and they were sort of our ideal customer profile. And so we did really good with that source, but we didn't get enough of it to cover a lot of the OpEx piece of it. So we wanted a lot more Google leads. What we did get is a lot of leads that we did get a lot of leads from different sources that were folks that were sort of like gauging whether they were interested, and we sort of had to sort of manage through some of those low lead sources, so very low intent, and weren't really the customer profile we were looking at. And so when you're in an area and you're looking at lead sources, you need to be able to understand, break it down month by month about, all right, I know X amount of leads are coming from here, X amount of leads are coming from here, X amount of leads coming from here. This will have a substantial impact on your ability to manage your P&L, like big time, because you could optimize very well and keep your costs flat or lower on your marketing expense, and and keep your acquisition costs for a customer. Now, what do I mean by acquisition costs? What does it cost me to acquire a new customer? All right, so if it's $2,000 for your business, it's way too much, right? So depending on your products you're selling, and so if you're paying for a lead for $100 and you got to pay up to $2,000 just to get that one customer, then there's some inefficiencies there that you've probably got to look at. And if you're not selling $14,000-$20,000 jobs, then that acquisition cost needs to be sort of in the ranges of under $1,000. And I'll say on anything under 500 is really good. And so you really got to find free sources, whether that be referrals, whether that be sort of really good reviews, are critical, because that allows you to have sort of the good word of mouth, and it allows you sort of to really just sort of optimize your ability to keep the acquisition costs extremely low. And so people are calling you because they just see your ad on they see your ad, or they see you on Google and Yelp, and you didn't have to spend $1 to actually do anything. That's terrific, right? And so where your CAC, or customer acquisition cost, gets out of whack is that you're paying a lot of paid marketing and you're not really getting the conversion rates you want. And so you really want to be really cognizant of that. But the way you do it really well is that you understand from month to month, how am I tracking my costs? And so one of the things we look at is that, hey, you look at for example, in this case, we have Google local services. We spent $12,000 calls, so we got 2,000 calls from that. We booked 34% of those calls, and the cost of the leads ended up coming out to sort of $6 a lead. and our acquisition cost was $176, right? And so that's good. Then you look at your search ads, your pay per clicks. So you got 500 calls out of that. You booked about 28% of it. So your cost of leads went up to $10. So your acquisition cost has gone up 357. And again, it's going to come down to your ability to actually book those, is to book it, right? So am I booking it? And then there's a whole other category I can get into. Well, the ones you book versus the ones you actually demoed, or the person was actually there. Like we usually call those issued to demo, demo to book rates. And so there's a lot of that marketing jargon that goes into it. But in this case, we just sort of have a simple exercise here. And the concept here is like, what is my acquisition cost to get one customer, right? So in this case, Google probably has sort of the better cost set up here. So you sort of want to optimize towards Google, be your SEOs, your landing pages, your reviews that you guys do, you guys do installation. They're getting reviews afterwards, all very, very critical in that sense. And so those are things you want to sort of optimize towards to keep your acquisition costs as low as possible. Then you can see direct referrals, $1,000. Hey, you probably had to pay it out. Somebody gave you, one of your folks or somebody else said, I'm going to refer somebody to you, and you just gave them $1,000. Or you have, so that could be sort of a direct referral in that sense, but you also have other ways of getting direct referrals where you could actually have sort of a program that happens naturally from your customer base. And in this case, you got 600 calls out of it. You booked about 55% of them. That comes out to 167, and acquisition costs there is $30. And so the way you would execute that in some cases is that you have you could have marketing drip campaigns from your customers that you had before, and give them some kind of referral program. And so that's sort of how you sort of play into that to get that number that low. But certainly worth noting that the key point here is that I'm tracking it, right? So you could hear some business stories where I have no idea, where I just pay Google as much as I can, and I don't deal with anybody else. That's you do want to make sure that you optimize Google too, because there's some stuff within Google when you look at your keyword, you could be overspending there as well. So you got to be careful. But also having different sources are also pretty good too, because you sort of diversify a little bit. If Google goes down, you don't want your entire business to be on one platform, right? So that's the other critical point as well. Moving on, when you look at sort of the math, and what happens when revenue grows and fixed costs do not, is when you look at gross profit, this is going to be your remember, gross profit's going to be sort of the math that we had before. We had gross margin, now we have gross profit. Gross profit's going to take off the OPEX, the operating expense, and that's going to be your 90,000, 105, 125. And then, so it's going to be your gross margin. So I put profit on there, so I apologize. And then you take out your operating expense, and then you get your net income. Okay, so revenue, cost of goods, your gross profit in terms of the dollars. Gross margin is going to be your percentage, and gross profit is going to give you the actual dollars of what you got from revenue minus cost of goods. And then now you're going to take off you're going to take off like you're operating the business, and then you're going to get your net income. So in May, my net income after paying all my bills, I got $42,000, right? And so in May 56, and then in June 75, and then you sort of see the net margin as well, which I have on there. So it went to 23%, 26, 30. So you sort of see the trend going up as business goes up. As you get more revenue, the net margin gets better if you can manage your operating expense, right? So rent's not going to go up any higher. Um, because now you've got to a point where you've beaten break even and you're going even higher than break even, so it stays pretty flat. Rent's not going up. Salaries are not going up that fast, and so they stay where they're at in terms of the OpEx. Subscription stuff is not going up. So the point is anything that if you drive more revenue, then your cost structure of where it's at is good. So because you keep the difference, and so when you get to June, you're making a little bit more money because your fixed cost and sort of go up with it. Now the thing that'll go up with it is going to be your variable cost, which is your cost of goods. Like my cost to create more stuff is going to go up, and so. But in terms of your fixed costs, it's not gonna go up. So you capture that back in terms of your net income. Now, it's worth saying that net income is not the same as EBITDA. EBITDA is going to be sort of how your business is actually valued, and that's going to include sort of your interest, taxes, and everything else at the end of the day, which will come off that $42,000. So you typically will sort of deal with that with your accountant either on a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis to sort of pay your taxes on what you have from your net income. Okay. Um, and so when you look at sort of the three traps, which are real money problems, and I'll talk about this in my next session more deeply, is sort of the marketing trap, not tracking conversions by sources. And so you could leave a lot of real money on the table if you just sort of don't pay attention to it. And in some cases, I threw some numbers out there and I said, hey, if you don't do it, you could probably lose just not paying attention to the source. And so what do I mean by that? You could be paying a source uh, I'm paying when I mean the source, you've hired a company to give you leads, and the leads that they give you are not necessarily converting at a conversion rate that is conducive to the business structure that you need, whether you are not booking enough of them, customers are not showing up, they're not really your ideal customer profile, and so you've let it go on for a while and you just sort of burning cash, and so that's important to note. Because now you're probably taking away time and resources from your business to actually go deal with those leads. The other part too is not tracking which channel actually converts, and so which are the best channels for me that I feel like converts to get me the revenue that I need to run the business. And so you really want to pay attention to that because that's really really critical. And so you could lose in my cases, we had noticed about $6,500 of sources that we had here that was sort of I'm using it for this example, but you could sort of lose a good amount of money per month on that. And so what I would do here, $6,500, is sort of go back to the sources and say, what can we do to improve this? Can we get a better cost structure because these don't convert? So you can negotiate with your vendor, and say, let's make an alignment, let's fix this. And so, but if you don't do anything, then you're just going to eat that cost. And so those are things that you would just really want to pay attention to. When you look at cost of materials, some of the traps you run into, and so this is probably a bigger problem for anybody for the most part, is going to be sort of the material piece of it, is buying material at retail. So you have your guys running the stores, you have your guys with credit cards at Home Depot, at Lowe's, and they're just like racking it up. The problem with that is that your cost of good is going to ramp up pretty fast. It's like your gross margin is going to take a hit for that because and your customer experience changes a little bit too, because if you go back and raise a price because of that to your customer, then that's a very negative experience to the customer. Then if you eat the difference, then that's a hit to your business because you're not paying attention to that difference. And so a lot of times I see this happen because we didn't anticipate this problem to happen, and so we are going to go deal with it to deal with the customer. And so the difference is that you just end up eating the difference. And if you do it enough in a month, what I call poor planning is that it just has sort of a material impact on your gross margin, and so you end up eating like 4 or 5 points just on bad purchasing habits. And so And so what you really want to be is on terms with somebody with a negotiated contract on pricing. And so, well, Jimmy, I'm a small guy. I don't really have an account, and I'm just starting off now, so I got to deal with what I got. I understand that. I do think that in the long term, as you sort of progress, the biggest play is to sort of get to a point where you have some trust with some supply houses or some of the retailers on a negotiated pricing piece of it, because just paying full retail is just going to just destroy the longevity of your business in the long term. And so you really, really want to pay attention to that. I can't express that enough. I think that I've saved the most amount of money in my role. This is a very controllable component of the job, and I was able to negotiate several vendors to a flat number that I know I'm making X, and I need to make sure Y is pretty consistently flat. And so I just spent a lot of time on just working with vendors and saying I need my number to be here. Let's just see what I could do. If they couldn't do it, then I found another vendor that could actually get me to my number, right? So that's rule number one. And so you really want to manage your gross margins. And then we worked on bulk purchases. Look, some vendors said, look, I'll give you a better number if you commit to buying a bulk number. So if you have 20 jobs in a month, and you know you're always going to use that same product 20 times in every project, then you should buy it bulk at a better number. And so instead of paying retail for every time it happens. And so those are things that you really, really, really they're very critical to keeping your cost of goods line as low as possible. The last part I have on here is going to be sort of your sub labor traps. And so these are going to be some of your customers some of the vendors that you use to supplement your jobs. And so one of the biggest traps you'll have is that the subs will have a particular labor number that may be substantially higher than what you would typically take in a job, but you need somebody to help you out in this jam, and you have to take the hit on that. And so again, if you do enough of that, your cost of goods just gets destroyed really, really fast. It is worth taking the time, as much as the product is, to also have backup labor in the market, but negotiated backup labor in the market to support you. I can't stress that enough. As you scale as a business and get bigger, one of the things you want to make sure is that you have negotiated contracts with some of the subs that support you at a set rate. If you let them set the rate, it will be higher than the product what you typically produce, and then you have to either charge the customer way much more, or you're going to eat the difference. In some cases, these guys may be 50-70% more of your traditional labor rate. And so you really want to be careful about that part. I sort of fell in that trap at one point where we were just saying we were in a jam, we had a couple of jobs lined out, and we just couldn't get back to the job. We had to hire somebody else to do it. And man, they were like $2,000 more than what I typically would have paid for just to do the job. And so, and in no way we were going to charge it back to the homeowner, because we already had an agreement. It was already on a price, and we just needed to get off the job, and we had never sort of negotiated a contract with that vendor. What I ended up doing is that I worked with vendors after that, and I said, here's my flat number. If we need you in an emergency, I need you to actually be sort of in that price range for you to actually to do it. And so I had a couple of vendors that agreed to it, and that essentially kept us very, very stable with regards to projects that came up, and we gave them some more projects to support us because they were very, very helpful. And so it allows some flexibility and built some capacity in our business to actually do more, right? So those are sort of strategically, if you're very strategic, I would say materials and sub labor, you got to always negotiate those prices to keep your cost of goods to your business, what you're driving revenue, keep your cost of goods to a good point so that you generate enough good gross margin for the business. So that's my talk on that. I could talk about it all day, but I certainly wanted to point those things out. And then the last thing I have is when you look at sort of the three numbers, 5 actions, right? So and I'm using this business scenario as sort of the gross margin. I mean, there's numbers of ways to do. There's roofing. There's all these other home services components that we could get into. but I'm using 50% sort of the target, and then marketing as part of revenue for home service contractor, 8% is really really ideal. I would say um, you have some flexibility depending on what kind of product you're selling. If you're selling very very high item, high ticket product, I think that number is a little bit higher. I thought we were selling products that were like $14,000 to $20,000, if not more. And so you have a little bit more wiggle room to do a little bit higher. But if you're just going to be small ticket items under $1,000, then you're really going to want to be really efficient with your marketing costs, because you're gonna need the volume of activity to happen. So and then your net margin, you really want to be around 30%. This is going to be after you pay all your bills and everything else, and so you want to be at 30%. Actually, keep some money there. The higher, the better. But 30% is really good, really solid, healthy number. And so those are kind of things you sort of look at when you look at sort of the P&L component of it. There's certainly a lot of levers to pull. Every business has very unique scenarios, and so but typically the math will tell you, and if you looking at it every month, it'll tell you what you need to do. And then you got to take from the P&L, you got to put actionable plans to your staff to actually drive the results to change the P&L the next month. You just can't look at it and do nothing and then expect it to change the following month. And so you actually have to look at it and sort of make strategic plans to actually get it to move, right? So and one of the things I did want to flag is, of course, is just number one, it always starts with your marketing costs. If you're a home service business, it looks at your marketing costs, your lead source. I spend a lot of time just sort of looking at that and getting that aligned. And because the bigger, as you get bigger in scale, that's a critical component of how do I make sure we are making revenue every day of the week, and that we have this going in the right direction. And then typically starts with your ability to market and your ability to convert, right? So those are very critical components. Your reputation is pretty big, and so you want to make sure that your staff, your team is always sort of on the same page, whether it be the guys that are out in the field, guys in the office, or ladies and guys in the office, ladies and guys in the field, that they're all on the same page about making sure that their reputation stays pretty clean, because it does have a direct impact on your ability to grow the business. So if anybody has any questions or want to reach out to me about their business, I'm more than happy to sort of walk them through what I think about their P&L, or where I think they should focus on. If you're really good with marketing, then it may be more and more sort of an operational component that you could actually get better at. And so I have a lot of different ways that I look at that and can support. In the next two sessions, we'll talk about really, really deep dive into each of these categories and talk about, all right, what percentage of this matters? How do I look at sort of variances when I'm bringing up variances? Because I think that's very critical. If I set a time frame of, if I set a forecast of, hey, I need to be at X amount of dollars per month, and I essentially perform to lower than that or higher than that, then if I'm lower than that, I need to understand what my action plan is to actually get back on track. If I'm higher than that, then I'm understanding what gave me the success to get there, and sort of like, let's double down on that, or make it happen more, or push it across the rest of the organization, so that actually can see more of that success. But you'll never know that unless you have your reporting structure does that. You understand how to do that, and you understand where to focus. So again, thank you for your time. And if there's any questions, please feel free to leave comments on my channel, and of course subscribe as well too. Thank you.